In September 2021, I tore my right rotator cuff whilst competing on the pommel horse in my final ever competition. During the course of my career that spanned over 2 decades, I tried almost every recovery strategy in the book. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work, and to be honest, some of them were pretty bizarre. To this day, I still incorporate lots of those recovery methods into my everyday life, and this is my story. So back in the beginning when I first started gymnastics, it was the year 2000, the late 1990s. And honestly, I didn't really have much information, and there wasn't a lot of information out there in terms of recovery, nutrition, sleeping. It just wasn't there, and it wasn't important because I was doing gymnastics for the fun of it. And I think over the course of my career, especially as I got towards the end of my career and I was coming close to the age of retirement, recovery became a massive part of what I was doing. It was huge. It was pivotal. It was so important because, I couldn't do the hours I was doing when I was a teenager, and I was having to be really, really smart and almost outthink a lot of my competitors in many ways. And I think the most effective recovery strategy out there that I've ever come across is sleep. And it sounds so simple and so basic, but it's massive, it's huge. And I never really understood this until probably towards the middle part of my career and the end of my career, when I'd faced like some real difficult challenges. And when I look back and I think about some of the traumatic injuries I had during my career, what coincided with that was always a lack of sleep. And, I've spoke about when I was a kid, I really struggled sleeping. Like, I used to hallucinate. I was scared of the dark. I had to sleep with a light on. But as I started to do gymnastics more and more, and I got more and more tired and exhausted from the amount of work I was doing, I started to sleep a lot better, and I would actually sleep, sometimes up to 12 hours a day when I was a teenager. I was growing, working out 6 hours a day, doing schoolwork, so it was never really an issue. It only really became an issue for the first time when I was about 21. So at 21, I had my ankle injury. It was really serious. And me and my little brother did something pretty stupid. We had, around this same time, around that summer, we'd started to go down some YouTube rabbit holes, and I learnt about sleep paralysis. And I was like, there's no way that's real. I had watched a YouTube video on it, and it was like a step-by-step YouTube guide on how to give yourself sleep paralysis. So me and my brother, being stupid, were like, right, let's try this out. And it worked. And the problem was, it coincided with a time when I was not sleeping properly because I'd just injured my ankle. At this point, I had no idea how important sleep was for recovery, especially after you've just had surgery. I was also just sitting at home in bed all day. My leg was up. I was watching TV till early hours in the morning. I think I was binge watching Breaking Bad. I was sometimes just having a few beers every night. So that didn't help with my sleep. And I was starting to try and do this sleep paralysis thing with my brother. And I'll never forget the first time he told me that it happened. I was at Lilleshall. My mum and dad were on holiday, and he was in bed. He's asleep, and what happens is your brain thinks your body thinks you're asleep, but your brain is still active, and it's like somebody comes into your room like a dark figure and is pressing down on your chest, and you're paralyzed. You can move your eyes, but you can't move. It sounds mental, but go and search it on the internet. And my brother sent me this big long Facebook message. I've still got it. He said it was so frightening. I was like, I want to try it, and then it genuinely became a serious problem. So every time I would sleep for 6 months, I'd have this sleep paralysis thing, which is obviously not good when I'm recovering from surgery and I've got to try and train properly. And in the end, I had to go to the physios. So the EIS team, I went to the doctor. She was brilliant, that doctor at the time, and she'd said that she'd worked with a footballer that had real issues with sleeping. And what we started to try and do was acupuncture my feet. Because when you do acupuncture, which is another form of recovery, there's certain spots in your body that will relax your muscles. And if you do it in your feet, it will help you fall asleep and become tired. And the other thing I started doing around that time, which I still do to this day, was started reading. I never used to read. I really struggled reading when I was a kid. But I found when I started reading, and if I would read before bed instead of flicking through my phone or watching TV, I'd read 4 or 5 pages and it just conked me out. So after about 6 months, and my life was just getting very difficult with this sleep paralysis, I managed to get rid of it and stop doing it. But that just showed me at that point how important sleep was for recovery. And when it's not there, what started out as a little experiment with me and my brother quickly became an absolute nightmare. So that was, really challenging at that time. And it taught me just how important it was. But it wasn't until I really started to listen to people talk about sleep and do a bit more research that I found out that, nearly in every single language in the world, I heard this a couple of years ago. Someone said this on a podcast. The phrase sleep on a problem exists in nearly every language in the world. And there's a reason for that. And this used to happen a lot when I was a kid. I'd be doing a skill in the gym and be really struggling with that. I just couldn't get it right. And I'd go back home, I'd go to sleep, I'd come back the next day and it just clicked straight away. I used to think, wow, what is that? Like, what's different from yesterday to today? I just used to think it was the reps in the gym, and it wasn't. A lot of the time, it's that your brain keeps working on those new pathways while you're sleeping. So it's not just important for recovery in your body, it's really important for actually learning skills and skill learning. Once I started to figure that out, I put a lot more respect on sleep. But again, when I look at kind of the big traumatic injuries I had in my life, they all coincide with me not sleeping properly. You know, when I had my big neck injury, where I was going through my mental health issues at the same time, you know, I just couldn't sleep. And that was massively, it was like a compounding effect on all the issues I had in my life. So what I did do towards the end of my career was use sleep as a real marker. Sleep became, when I was injured, towards the end of my career, I'd figured out that the first thing I've got to do if I've got an injury is get pain-free doing normal everyday tasks. So if I go back to 2011 when I was 18, I went to the World Championships, had a stress fracture in my collarbone. I've talked about this before on the podcast. I couldn't wear a seatbelt. I couldn't chalk my hands up. I was in agony all the time. I was on painkillers. By the end of my career, I used being able to sleep without any pain as a real marker for whether or not I should be in the gym. If I can't sleep because I'm in agony with my shoulders or my neck or whatever it might be, I shouldn't be going to the gym doing gymnastics. So that was really important. And I used that towards the end of my career, and I still use it now. You know, if I go to the gym and I lift weights for 3 days and my shoulder's struggling so I can't sleep properly, that's probably an indication that I need to take it a little bit easy. So that became really, really important towards the end of my career, using sleep as a marker for injuries and knowing that, okay, if I'm not getting a good night's sleep, I'm not recovering properly, you know, I'm not going to have the right energy. And then same with going out. Like when I would go out, when I was younger, I wouldn't go out a lot, but when I did, I knew that I wouldn't want Sergey to know that I'd been out with my friends partying. And a big part, it's like a whole mixture of things that come together. You've got the drinking that is a massive inflammatory. So my ankle always swells up. The ankle that I've had surgery on, it swells up whenever I've had a drink. But also you're missing that sleep. And when you've drank alcohol, it's not real sleep. It doesn't count. And you can't bank sleep. I listened to a podcast with a guy called Matthew Walker. Like, you can't miss a whole night's of sleep and then sleep for 2 days and you get that back. It doesn't work like that. So going to bed at 4 a.m. on a weekend after you've been drinking is really bad for recovery. And the most important thing to remember, and I'd say this to young athletes in any sport that are now at the point where they can go out, they've turned 18, is just think about if you go into the gym on a Monday and you've not had a good night's sleep over the weekend, you've maybe drank a bit of alcohol, it's an inflammatory, it's also like a painkiller, so you might have a little niggling injury at the time, and you go in on a Monday and you feel great, and all it is because you've had a drink over the weekend. Like, that's super important to make sure that your coach is aware of that. So talk to your coach way before you're planning to go out and say, look, we've got this big competition in 2 months' time. After that, I want a few weeks where I can relax and see my friends and go out. There's a much healthier way to go about it rather than me. I was so scared to tell Sergey that I was going out or partying or drinking or sleeping. I'd come in on the Monday and I want to look like everything was all together. Like I had all my stuff together and I was fine. I hadn't been out. I'd had a good night's sleep, and then I'd overcompensate and train even harder. And that's super dangerous because if Sergey's got no idea at what state I'm in that day, he's going to push me like I have had a restful weekend, you know, and I've got loads of sleep. So that's super important for the young athletes. And I guess back at the start, when I first started, when we move into the kind of the nutrition side of things, when I was a kid, my favourite cars were red cars. I used to think that red cars were the fastest. So I can remember my auntie had like I think it was maybe a Corsa. My dad had a dead nice car back then. He was doing well. I think he had like an Audi. I used to think that my auntie's little Corsa was better than my dad's because it was red. I used to think red cars were the fast cars. So my favourite car when I was a kid was always a red Ferrari. And I've always said, one day I'm going to have a red Ferrari. But towards the middle of my career, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek. And when I go into schools and I talk to kids about nutrition and fuel in your body, I always say, look, I used to think of myself like a sports car, and you don't put rubbish fuel in a sports car. You got to put the best fuel in it, and you have a pit stop team, and they help you. That's kind of what I had at the end. I had this team of people with all this knowledge that they could share with me and help me to make sure that when I got to the checkered flag on the start line, I was ready to go in the best possible shape of my life. But that took me many years to learn that. And back in the beginning, I certainly didn't fuel myself like I was a sports car. And that was fine because I was a kid and I was training 6 or 7 hours a day, had a really fast metabolism. I just needed food, but the knowledge wasn't there. I was getting by on the knowledge from my dad that he had from football when he was playing in the 80s and the 90s, and Sergey and his knowledge. So like my dad, for instance, I think my granddad used to give my dad like a pint with a shot of whiskey in it and 2 raw eggs. And that was like his nutritional energy drink for training. And I can remember when we were a kid and I started training before school, Sergey had a conversation with my dad and he said, right, Sam needs to drink full fat milk and he needs to drink eggs for breakfast every day. So I remember a period of time where I had a full English every morning at 6 o'clock. My dad would make it. And like the whole family just drank like blue top milk from then on. I still drink it to this day because I can't drink semi-skim milk. So it was really funny. That was like my nutritional advice. And I'd get sent to the gym every day with like 2 Galaxy chocolate bars, 2 packets of wine gums and 2 fizzy Lucasades, which, you know, at that age, I probably needed it. All I needed was like energy and calories to consume because I was just burning it. A bit like my great granddad was a stoker in the Navy. So he was down there shoveling coal to get the boats going. And I was just a bit like that. I just needed to put loads of food into my body. And I grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s, and people always say to me, oh, what was your diet like? And I always joke, and I say, well, I went to the Olympics on potato waffles and smiley faces. And they laugh, but it's true. Like, as I was growing up, it wasn't until I got pretty close to 2009 was the first time we ever had like a specialist full-time physio. Like, we'd never had that before. It was just like a one-off consultant that would come into the camps or come with us to competitions, and they were with us full-time. Up until that point, we'd never had that. So there's just no education or knowledge. We were just kind of winging it in many ways. And yeah, I really did grow up on like alphabets and smiley faces and Dairy Lee Lunchables, and that's all I was eating in those early years when I was younger. That's kind of all we knew. We didn't know any better. And it worked. I mean, I went to the Olympics, but I think in 2009, when the EIS came on board and we kind of had a more professional setup within the sport of gymnastics on the men's and women's side, that really changed things. And I remember the first thing they really implemented, there were 2 things that just stick out to me. The first one was hydration. I'd never heard of like hydration. Sergey had never told me, Sam, you've got to drink loads of water in your training session. In fact, none of us really ever drank much liquid when we were training because we thought that's just going to sit in our stomach and make us heavier when we're doing rings and stuff. And they started testing like our urine every morning to see how dehydrated we was. So every morning before gym, it was such a chore. We'd have to take a urine sample. We'd have to go to the gym before training started, put it on a little tester, and they'd test the hydration. And initially, we were all off the chart. We were super high. And the sweet spot, I think, was always between 300 and 700. And we were all like over 1,000, so super dehydrated. So that's the first thing that they really brought in and implemented. And they started to teach us a little bit. And I think just that knowledge and someone explaining why you're doing something is really important, because there was certainly a miscommunication and a missed opportunity in the beginning when the physios and nutritionists, psychologists all came in, because they told us what to do, but didn't necessarily explain why or explain why to the coaches, you know, because the coaches just wanted to focus on coaching gymnastics, and that is their job. That's all they should be doing. These guys were coming in telling us to do all of this stuff, and nobody really understood why, I think, in the beginning. But that was the first thing, the hydration thing. And I remember a story of one of my teammates that I trained with that competed at the test event in London, Ruslan. The morning of the competition, he tested the highest hydration they'd ever seen and was at like 1,600. And they were like, if you don't like get loads of water and salts in your system now, like you could end up in hospital. This is the morning of the Olympic test event. So like getting all these liquids into him. And I remember that him and his coach and the other lads that they trained with, they came from Ukraine. Their methodology for going to a competition was don't drink loads of water because you don't want to be heavy. We want you to be as light as possible. So all they would do on like the day of a competition was suck a lemon, which there's no science to that whatsoever, I'm sure. That's all they would do. That's why he was super dehydrated. And they always used to sit in the saunas. All the Ukrainians and Russian gymnasts, they'd be in the sauna all the time, trying to shed weight to be as light as they can. So that tells you a bit about just the lack of education that we had back then, but it was starting to come in. And then the other thing they spotted is that we grew up, when I was a kid, I was never really outside. I mean, I was a little bit because I played football, but I was in the gym. And if it was the winter, my dad had dropped me off at the gym at 6 a.m. when it's like pitch black. I'd go to the gym all day. I'd finish at 8 o'clock and he'd pick me up in the dark. So I'd never really see the sunshine, except for when I was at school. But at school, at lunchtime, we'd go and hide in the gym. So I was never getting any sunlight. And I never realized how important vitamin D is just for your energy levels, also for your bone health. And they noticed that we were all super low in vitamin D. So straight away, they put us on vitamin D tablets. And yeah, that was really, really cool because you could see the sports science have a real impact. And within 6 months, I think nearly everybody's vitamin D levels were back up to normal. So yeah, it's cool looking back to see that when that sports science came in, it did have a real impact straight away. But yeah, fueling your body and the nutrition side of things, it became super, super important. And yeah, I guess when I started fasting towards the end of my career, it's really interesting how what happened was, because I was starving my body of all the nutrients that I needed, when I did certain types of exercise, I craved different foods, which I found fascinating. So if I was fasting for, let's say, 12 hours, 14 hours in the day, and doing 6 hours of exercise, depending on what sessions I was doing, I would crave different types of food, different food groups. So if I was doing, say, gymnastics routine sessions, after the session, I'd crave like sugar and fats because my brain been working really hard. Or if I went to the gym and like lifted weights, I would crave like protein. It was really weird. And it was really interesting as well. And it makes so much sense, right? I'm starving my body of what it needs, and my body's screaming at me, right, we need fruit and veg, or we need carbohydrates, I need energy, or you need protein, or you need fats for your brain. But different types of exercise, I crave different foods afterwards. I'd go sit on the bike, and what I would do is when I was on the bike, I'd figured this out, that I used to visualize my routines. But I took it to the next level and I thought, if I visualize my routines while I'm on the watt bike and I'm absolutely dying, surely it's more beneficial to go through my routine while my legs feel tired like they will when I actually do a routine. So I was visualizing while I was tired. And so I'd do these bike sessions and they'd last like 15 minutes. And afterwards, I'd just crave carbohydrates. I just want pasta and bread and stuff. Yeah, it was really cool to see that. And obviously, I'd realized now that starving myself of what it needed was not the right thing to do. It was massively detrimental and it had a huge negative impact on my training, my recovery, and everything that was going on in my life, to be honest, around that period of time. And I think now I try to really stick to like a balanced diet. And I know that's like a cliche thing to say, but it's so important. And when I was training and growing up, you know, when you do elite sport at the very high level, you've got to remember that you're putting your nervous system through a lot of stress. And you're training 6 or 7 hours a day, and you're always like, it's like you're always on edge. You're like ready to go to compete, and your stress levels are through the roof. So you're really prone to illness. And I used to get ill a lot when I was growing up. And that's where like fruit and vegetables and vitamins and minerals really come in, and they play a key role. So I make sure that I'm eating loads of fruit and veg throughout the week, especially when I'm training, just to get those vitamins in me, because I really need that. Because my immune system, like I say, when I'm training 6 or 7 hours a day, it's super vulnerable. So that's really important. When I'm lifting weights or doing training sessions, protein's massive. You know, even I still learn things to this day. I started going to the gym at the start of the year. I've never been to the gym purely to build muscle or build size. Whenever I went to a fitness gym in the past, it was very specifically tailored towards gymnastics. So I never wanted to get too heavy. So I would lift high weight, low reps. Whereas now I'm doing this German volume training with Josh, who's like my training partner, and we're doing like 10 sets, 10 reps. So it's very different. And I was very conscious that, you know, I've got a target weight that I want to try and get to that I've never been at. And I'm worried that I'll like get to a point where I'll plateau. And Josh again, this comes back to the education and knowledge, right? He explained to me, look, for every kilo of body mass, you need 1.5 grams of protein. I didn't even know that. And I was an elite athlete competing right at the highest level. I'm sure that knowledge would have made a huge impact when I was training. It would have massively helped things, especially with recovery towards the end of my career, because I did get a lot of muscle injuries. And even now, sitting here talking about this, it kind of makes sense. You know, I tore my rotator cuff and the head of my bicep and my hamstring. I did that quite a lot towards the end of my career. It's probably because I wasn't eating enough protein. I think carbohydrates, like I said, they're like the fuel that get the engine going. A bit like my granddad, you know, stoking the fires in the ships, and then the fats is like brain food, man. It's for your brain. When you do gymnastics, it's like doing really fast mental maths. You're just using your brain the whole time. So yeah, fats are super important as well. So I just eat a balanced diet, but I try really hard not to be too extreme, especially after my history with, you know, fasting myself. And, you know, essentially I had an eating disorder at that time. I have to be really careful. And what I do now is I make sure I implement 3 meals a day. That's like a non-negotiable for me. It's super important that I eat at breakfast, I eat at lunch, and I eat at dinner. And that way I know, at the very minimum, I'm getting 3 meals in each day, and that's like enough energy and enough calories, I guess. And then the other things, when we move on to talk about marginal gains, and this stuff kind of came in probably post-2012. This is when this really came into like our setup at Team GB. And it's really funny, like when I look back, I think we were almost like the guinea pigs for football. I always used to notice that we would try new methods and new techniques, and then you'd see them crop up in football like a year later. So I'd see like footballers with kinesio tape on, or foam rollering, or doing certain stretching, or wearing like compression suits, and it'd always come a bit after there was a lag. We'd try it first, they'd test it out, and then if it worked, football would take it into football. It's really interesting now that a lot of the people that are involved within the England football setup all came from the EIS and the Team GB Olympic sports, because a lot of those guys that work in physio, nutrition, psychology, they all want to be in football, but it's really good for them to have worked in an Olympic discipline. That's massive, because then it sticks out on their CV and they go back into football. So a lot of the physios that I worked with, they now work with the England football team. And I think the England football team, probably after the success of 2012 and Team GB, they almost cherry-picked all the best people and brought them into the footballing setup, which is really cool, because I see them on TV, and when you watch the YouTube England setup stuff at St George's Park, I'm like, oh, that's my physio, that's Simon, who used to work with me, so that's really cool. And yeah, I think in many ways we were like the guinea pigs, and some of the stuff that they brought in, and some of the weird ones, bonkers. I can remember having to drink beetroot juice. Beetroot juice became a thing. I don't know if it is anymore, I'm pretty sure it's not, but for like 2 or 3 years, we'd have these shots of beetroot juice, and I hate beetroot. And we were told that this is going to really help with your recovery. So I used to neck this beetroot stuff like before my session or after my session. I used to hate it. The other one was cherry juice, like really sour cherry juice. And I'm sure they've got some properties to them, like recovery. I'm sure they help with recovery. There's loads of research done on them. But yeah, we used to try all these weird things. And the compression stuff was massive. So I remember getting offered the chance to have a tailored compression suit put together for me that would help me with recovery, like after training, and you could sleep in it. I remember for years, like 2 or 3 years, sleeping in this recovery suit, and it used to be so uncomfortable to sleep in. It used to be so hot, and I'd be sweating, and it used to massively affect my sleep. But I wore this thing for like 2 or 3 years. I don't know whether it worked, and a lot of these things, you know, I would do because I was so scared that I never knew whether they were working, but I was like, but maybe it is working, so I don't want to it was like a weird placebo thing, you know? So I probably like had disrupted sleep for 2 or 3 years because I was wearing this itchy like compression suit every night for bed. And so there was loads of things that came in. I remember in the beginning, like never really understanding saunas and hot and cold therapy. And there was always a big like discussion between the Russian coaches we had at the time massively believed in saunas because like that whole culture over there in the Eastern Bloc and like the Scandinavian countries, like they all just get saunas. It's like a way of life for them. But a lot of the physios in the EIS team said there's not really much benefit to it. You're much better doing like cold therapy. So we had an ice bath at Lilleshall, and it was me and my old training partner, Sam Hunter, and this was around 2010. And we'd gone in to this little room, and there was a sauna in there and a big metal ice tub, and there was basically a sheet of paper on the wall, and there was different ice bath recovery methods. And we'd go in there, just us two, we were the only people that would do it back then, and we must have been like the first to the game to do this. And we'd go and try these different methods, and some of them were like 2 minutes in, 2 minutes in the hot shower, 2 minutes in, 2 minutes in the hot shower. Some of them were like 10 minutes in. We had no idea whether they were working or not. We just wanted to try and get some kind of advantage. But I guess like an example of where like that kind of stuff can go too far, and it definitely did with me. Like my training partners at the time, some of them, you know, I remember seeing people like weighing their food out, and yeah, the saunas and the ice baths became like religious, almost like because I really struggled with. I almost had like OCD like tendencies when I was growing up because, you know, if something works, and everyone will have this, whether they play football and they put their right sock on before their left sock, you hear loads of people talk about these little quirks that they do, or listen to a certain song before a match or before a competition. But like, you know, I started to fall into that trap in the lead up to the Commonwealth Games when I was 21, and I would do things like, I did everything in sixes. So because I had 6 years to go to London 2012 when I was a kid, and I ran around the field, and I was like, I've got 6 years to go to make the Olympic Games. I started doing everything in the number 6. I did this for years. So I would brush my teeth like 6 times on the right, 6 times on the left. I would drink a drink, I'd sip it 6 times. In the gym, there's like loads of cables that come off the equipment. This was the weirdest one I ever used to do. So cables would come off like the high bar, and it attaches it to the floor. And I used to imagine in my head that when they hit the floor, there were like lasers that came out directly from it. So if you ever go back, and if you were ever around me in the gym then, if you watched my feet, I would always like walk over these imaginary lasers. It's like not stepping on free drains. I do all of that kind of stuff. But you can see how that would creep into like the recovery side of things as well. So just becoming too extreme with it. And then at 21, when I shattered my ankle, I basically took that as my get out of jail free card. I went, this doesn't work. I've been told I'm not going to do gymnastics again. I'm going to stop saluting magpies and crossing on stairs. Like, I don't believe in it. It don't work. So yeah, around that time, loads of stuff had come in. It had become almost like a way to get a competitive edge on your competitors. And for me, somebody that was quite extreme, I took that certainly way too far at times. But I guess the things that I still do now, and the things that I really believe in and that certainly worked, and it's been a trial and error type process over the whole of my career, and I've, you know, kept things and took things out and tried to work out what works best for me. I guess the ones that are super important is always my sleep, you know. And once I started to learn more about my sleep, I've kind of implemented a lot of things that it give me the best possible chance of getting a good night's sleep. You know, there's simple stuff, and you'll hear people say it all the time, but it really works. Making sure I got like a consistent wake-up time. So making sure I wake up at like almost the same time every day is super important. Making sure I stay off my phone. You know, if you go on your phone and you're lying in bed watching stupid YouTube videos, or you're on TikTok before you go to bed, your brain's just so active, and that blue light, it really messes with the chemicals that are in your brain and help you go to sleep. So I don't do that. I try and read before bed. That really helps me with that. I'm making sure, like I said, that I'm trying to sleep the whole way through. So if I go through a period of time where I'm like waking up and it's quite intermittent like sleep, what I'll do is I'll starve myself of sleep a little bit. And what I mean by that is, instead of going to bed at 10, I'll stay up till 11. Or I'll stay up till 12 and make sure I'm sleeping through, because that's really important. It's really important that you're getting that REM sleep, that deep sleep. That's the most important for recovery. So sleep's massive for me right now. It's so important. I'm somebody that does not function very well off little sleep. I had a stag do at the weekend, and I've been knackered since I've got home because sleep is just so important for me. I love it. And now that I know that, you know, like I said, you sleep on a problem and your brain keeps working on problem solving even while you're sleeping. For athletes, I mean, it is literally like the best secret weapon you could possibly get, good sleep. So I implement that into my life. And when it comes to supplements, there were loads of stuff that I tried over my career. And at one point, you know, I'd got to the point when I was living with my granddad, and I was going through my mental health stuff, and I just couldn't put things together where, you know, I was taking like 7 or 8 pills a day, and they were all vitamins. So they were like vitamin C and zinc, like vitamin D, omega-3, glucosamine, I was taking CBD tablets. I was taking everything under the sun. And I sat there with my granddad, who had cancer and was taking all of his pills for cancer. And he sat there on his chair and I sat next to him with all of these pills for gymnastics. And I thought, what's going on here? This isn't right. We're like two massive addicts taking all of these pills. So I kind of I came to the conclusion towards the end of my career that like I wanted to just simplify things, really hold on to the things that worked and just strip back the things that didn't work. Because realistically, whether I was taking a CBD tablet every day or not, it wasn't going to make much of a difference. So yeah, in terms of supplements, the only things that I take now are creatine for the gym. From what I know, creatine has been like one of the most researched supplements you can possibly take that's been proven to work to help with recovery and also to help with you basically being able to train for longer. And so I've been doing that in the last 3 months. Now I'm going to the gym. I'm trying to get up to 70 kilos. That's my target, because when I came back from traveling, I'd lost loads of weight. I was down at like the lightest I'd been in years. I was like 63 kilos. I lost like 3/4 of a stone traveling, and I'm trying to now put on about 7 kilos and get to 70. But I guess the important thing about that as well is that, you know, Josh, who I train with, kind of asked me, what's your goal? And I said to him, well, I want to get to about 70 kilos because I've never been there, but I want to be able to hold off players when I'm playing football because I'm just getting shoved off a ball. He was like, okay, because I play as a striker. And so that's a really good goal to have. You know, it's not focused on like a medal or hitting a weight. It's like something that's, you know, it's a never-ending goal, basically. And I'm just trying to, get to that 70 kilos so I can hold players off. And it's working really well. And it's keeping me motivated. It's really positive. And I've implemented those things into that training that I've learned throughout my career. You know, I'm not in the gym every day weighing myself. I know that's not a good idea. So just once a month, I check where I'm at. So I'm really enjoying that, being in the gym. But the only supplements I take now are creatine. And then if I feel a bit run down, I'll have a vitamin C and zinc tablet, because they really work with helping me feel better if I'm a bit tired and run down. But only every now and then. And then in the winter months, I might take the vitamin D, because that does really work with like your energy levels. And I did notice when I got back home from traveling, and everything that I learn is normally through like making mistakes or life experiences. And we'd gone traveling, and for 4 months, we'd wake up every day, walk out the front door and get hit by sunshine. And I've never really experienced like holiday blues before, or winter blues, until we got back from traveling. And like we got back to England in January, and it's so miserable and grey and raining all the time. I just felt depressed. I'm like buzzing that the sunshine's out now and the weather seems to be coming back. But that just shows you how important that sunlight is on your face. And with the sleeping again, making sure that when you wake up in the morning, open the curtains, let the sun hit your face, because it makes a big difference. It like really wakes you up. So the supplements wise, that's all I take. I take creatine, vitamin C and zinc. Sometimes I take vitamin D, and then I'm having some whey protein just because I'm finding it really hard to get enough protein in my diet through my food. But more than anything, I try to get all the nutritional nutrients and minerals, vitamin. I try and get it all through my food. I think that's really important. I don't want to be chugging 6 or 7 different pills a day, so I try and have a really well-balanced diet. That's really important. I think saunas and ice baths I still do, because I do believe in them. The funny thing is, when I was doing those ice baths throughout my career, I hate the cold. I do not like the cold. I'm a really cold person anyway. I think I've got bad circulation, but I've also got really low body fat. So my body fat is super low, and I think I've probably got a really fast metabolism. I thought when I'd retire, I'd probably like fill out quite a bit and put on quite a lot of weight. It just hasn't happened. So I must just naturally have a really fast metabolism. It means I get quite cold. So going in the ice baths, when I used to do it with Sam at Little, I used to hate it. It used to make me miserable. But I was like, is this working? Is it not working? But now I really enjoy it. Go into the gym, lift weights with Josh, we go sit in the plunge pool for 5 minutes, and it massively helps with the circulation of your blood and the recovery. So I do that, and I love the sauna. I love the sauna. I like the heat. I like being in the sauna. I do my best thinking in the sauna as well. I always come up with my best ideas when I'm sat in the sauna. It's nice and quiet. And sometimes I meet some of the most interesting people I've ever met in a sauna as well. So David Lloyd, where I go there to do my plunge pool, the saunas, my recovery, and train in the gym. It's like that is like my temple, that place. I love it. It's such an amazing community, and it's really good for my recovery. And I still take my recovery really seriously now, even though I'm retired, because it's huge, you know. I want to be able to be doing sports for the rest of my life. So it's still a massive part of what I do. So yeah, they're the things that I still implement to this day. And some of the big life lessons that I learned, I think. And one thing that really changed my perspective on like how I train and recovery and probably burnout as well was I listened to a podcast with a mixed martial arts coach, and he said something that massively like changed my perspective. He said that I always pick consistency over intensity. And when I was younger, I always went with intensity, and I was never able to take the emotion out of my gymnastics. I'm such an emotional person, but I could never really use rationale or logic. And what I would do is just go hell for leather and just try and out-train everybody. And that was all right when I was younger and I was a teenager because I had enough energy and my body was fresh enough. But by the time I was at the end of my career, I just couldn't sustain that over a long period of time. And the example he used was that if me and you go to the gym and you do your maximum amount of chin-ups. So you max out. So let's say your max is 12 chin-ups. You do 12 chin-ups and you just can't possibly do another chin-up. You're going to be so exhausted that the next day you can't even do any chin-ups. You've got to take a day off. But if I go in and just do 7 and I'm pretty tired, but I can go in and do 7 again the next day and then 7 the next day, over the course of a year, I'm going to get way more repetitions in than you are because I will be more consistent. And I think that consistency over intensity is super important. And that's what I kind of apply now to all of these recovery strategies. It's just consistency. When I talk about having a good diet and eating nice, doesn't mean that I never relax and eat other stuff. What I try to do is actually not stop eating the other stuff. So I'll eat all the other good stuff that really helps with your recovery, but I'll go and have, like, it's just been Easter, right? So my mom, I'm 30 years old. I tell her every year and she still buys me an Easter egg. So she's bought me a nice, super posh Lindt Easter egg. So I've been eating that like all week. Or I'll go out with I had a stag do at the weekend and we went, I had some drinks, ate nice food. But consistency is the important thing. So like going to the gym now with Josh, I've been doing that for 3 months. My target's to get to that 70 kilos. The first month, and I've averaged about 3 days in the gym a week. First month, because I was super light, put on about 1.5 kilos of muscle. Amazing. Second month, hit a bit of a stalemate, only put on about 0.5 kilo. Then in March, put on nearly 2 kilos because I'm now getting that compounding interest of that consistency. That is really, really important. And I guess the biggest thing that I learned throughout my career that it'd be like the biggest piece of advice I could probably give young athletes, well, anybody. You don't have to be an athlete. Anybody in life is like the most important thing and the biggest marginal gain I could have ever got was being happy. Being happy outweighs all the little things. Those tiny little percents, whether I was wearing a recovery suit or what I was eating. I got to the point where at 23, I thought eating a slice of toast with Manuka honey was going to make me a superhero. That was never going to work. And actually, overtraining and overworking, it shows a lack of self-confidence and inexperience. It's hard. You have to be brave to say, actually, I've done enough today. Like, that's enough. And at the end of my career, I trusted my own ability so much. I had such strong, I guess, that self-confidence. I'd built those self-confidence reserves back up so much. And I believed in my ability that towards the end of my career, I remember when I was younger, for some reason, I would think that if my clothes are folded perfectly and neatly, and I've got a perfect night's sleep, and I had the best breakfast I could have had, that's going to determine whether I have a good gymnastics competition or not. All that says to me is a lack of self-confidence in my own ability. I should be able to have a bad night's sleep or eat a Chinese takeaway and still go and perform the next day. And towards my end of my career, I think what really gave me a massive competitive advantage was that I'd figured this out and I actually looked for challenges. I looked for opportunities where the scenario and the situation wasn't perfect. And rather than competing against anybody else, my conversation in my brain was, right, I've turned up today, it's snowing, it's freezing cold in the gym, can I still do my high bar routine? Or I've turned up today, I'm ready to present to the judge for my routine, but the computer's broke and I've got to stand for 10 minutes, rather than panicking and thinking, oh no, what's going to happen? This has messed up my pre-routine little system I've got. my mindset was, oh, great. Now let's see if I can do it now. Even when I've got a challenge and if I can do it now, that's even better. And it was just a game I was playing with myself. It was such a healthy and positive way to be in. And almost like I wish I'd learned that earlier in my career, because in that last final competition where I tore my rotator cuff and everything was going wrong, I was going, amazing, this is brilliant. Imagine if I pull this off now. It was so cool to have got to that point at the end of my career. You know, I went to the pommel horse, did my first element, tore my rotator cuff, my shoulders sticking up like this. And rather than going, oh my God, this is not going to plan, I was almost laughing at it. And I was curious. It was like I had this curiosity of, can I still do this? Can I still perform even though it's not perfect? And I think that was the secret ingredient at the end that made all the difference. But recovery is huge. There's no way you can undersell it. It makes a massive difference. But like I said, the most important thing I think is that you're happy. So if you're doing ice baths every day, you know, in freezing cold water that's less than 10 degrees, and you're never letting yourself eat chocolate and you're miserable, it's not worth it, because it won't make that much of a difference. But when you are happy and you bring all these recovery strategies in, like fueling your body like you're a red Ferrari, or sleeping properly and getting enough recovery in, making sure you're taking the right supplements, making sure you're communicating with your coach, your physios, your nutritionist, your psychologist, and more than anything else, making sure that you've got that self-confidence in your own ability. I think when you get to that point, that's when things can really go to the next level. And consistency over time will give you that compounding interest. But yeah, even to this day, I love trying to find new things. You know, I still foam roller after every gym session when I can. I don't do it all the time. I'm not perfect. I try to do it after football, otherwise I struggle to walk the next day. I make sure I try and eat consistently and eat healthy food. I make sure I try and get a good night's sleep. But if I don't, it isn't the end of the world, man. I'm still going to be able to go out there and perform because I do it consistently over a long period of time. Thank you for watching this episode. I hope you've really enjoyed it and you'll take some value from it. Please remember you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you could hit us with a 5-star rating on Spotify or on Apple Podcast, that makes a huge difference. We really appreciate all the support you've been giving us, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.